Hi there, this is Jacob Nash, and this is a review of Module 2 for AP Psychology. And I call this the Common Perspectives and Subfields. So we did learn about some perspectives on the last module, but here are the main ones that we use today. And subfields. So let's see. Well, let's talk about the nature and nurture issue. Maybe your teachers talked about this, maybe not. But it's a major debate in psychology about whether behavior is caused by nature or nurture. So what does that mean? Well, look at that. So here's Bunt. Remember that guy from Module 1? So he's a baby in the first picture, and he says, I was born to hate frying pans. My dad did. So it could be caused by genes or innate knowledge that you're born with. But if it's from nurture, then they think, oh, it's from experiences. If someone hit him in the head with a frying pan, maybe that's why he doesn't like it, because he says, oh, I hate frying pans. And he didn't before, but that experience made him. So that's the nature and nurture issue. Okay, so here's the best way that I can think of. Well, I didn't think of it. Of how you can remember the seven different perspectives. Now, I didn't come up with this. Well, actually, I don't even know if she did, but this is how I found out about it. This person. Sorry, I forgot what her name was, but you might want to watch that video for more in depth about it. So just look up the perspectives, and if you see a video that has a picture with that person, that's what it is. So you have a hand here, and there's different fingers, and they are a different perspective. So let's talk about psychodynamic. Well, that perspective is it looks at the unconscious mind and how childhood experiences affect thought processes and behavior. Well, doesn't that sound familiar? Remember, that was Freud. So if you think of the thumb as you're pointing back, like, oh, way back then that's psychodynamic. Then cognitive is the pointer finger. That looks at inner thoughts and memory. That's what cognitive means. So it's kind of hard to see in that picture, but you might see that I'm pointing at my face like I'm trying to remember something. That's not what people usually do, but that's like one of those sort of cliche, I don't know if that's the right words to use, but whatever, if you saw someone putting their hand or their finger on their face, you would think they're trying to think of something. Now, behavioral, well, they look at observable behaviors. So remember, the creators of this, they believed that you had to be able to observe. Remember Watson and Skinner? You have to be able to observe it. They're like, Freud, no, sir. And so you see, well, it might be hard to see in this picture, but if you see the Black Keys, they're using a certain finger in their Wild Child video. That's bad behavior, isn't it? Okay, then humanistic. Well, if I was married, but I'm not, that's just my car key thing or on my ring finger. That's the only thing I could think of because I don't have a ring. You're accepted. So the humanistic, remember that? I mean, you remember those guys, the Rogers and Maslow. They thought you needed acceptance and self-fulfillment. Self-fulfillment, in case you didn't know what that means, it's just being satisfied with the way that you are. Now, biological, it's the pinky finger because, as she mentioned, that's like this what your brainstem looks like. Hopefully, you'll never have to see a brainstem, but that's just about what size it is. So you remember that's biological. It came from your genes or environment. Now, social cultural. Well, if you gave someone a high five or well, that's not really your palm, but it still is your hand, and that once again the Black Keys, they realized that they should be nice to each other again back in 2019. And they remembered that they could make a lot of money, so they did a fist bump in the Go music video. But anyways, how do things change with the presence of others? That's what that perspective is. Lastly, we have the evolutionary one. You see there's just like a random sixth finger, and that like natural selection. And we're going to talk about that. I'm not going to mention that quite yet. I think it's on the next slide. I kind of forgot. But if it is, then I'll talk about it. So if you've seen Bruce Almighty, remember he has 7 fingers at one part because he gets tricked. All right. Oh, well, sure enough, that it's natural selection. So if you took biology a long time ago, if you haven't taken it yet, you might not know what this is. Well, can you guess who made it? It's that evolution guy. What's his name? Charles Darwin. So let's pretend that we have 2 different situations here. We have pictures of someone named Ray LaMontagne that you might not know who that is. He is a guitarist. Well, singer, whatever you want to say. Let's pretend these are different Ray LaMontaignes in 1978 and then 2018. 30-year difference. All right, well, let's see. What's different? Well, we see 5 Ray LaMontaignes that have baseball caps, and 3 that just have his usual hat, like his folk hat that he commonly wears, because he doesn't wear a baseball hat that's just photoshopped on. So it says the baseball cap LaMontaignes have a tendency to eat only supernova sandwiches for their whole life. Well, what happens if you eat the same thing? Well, all the time. Well, that might not be good. So maybe that they didn't survive with that trait, that they didn't survive. So, 30 years later, now there's only 1 with baseball cap, but still, it's not the same. Look at that. His hat is starting to turn brown, so you can tell that he's pretty much starting to be like the other ones anyways. So that's natural selection. It's really just a survival of the fittest, whatever's the best thing. All the bad things that aren't good, they go away over time. They die off, and obviously that's more of like a biological perspective. Obviously, it's when we're using this in psychology, people are not dying, but a certain trait is dying off. The more people are born with it, it's differing. If the people weren't successful with it, then the brain adapts. Okay. All right, well, now let's look at the levels of analysis. Well, remember the slide with the hand a couple slides ago, that was a whole bunch of differing perspectives. Those are different people that are like, oh, it's only this. But there's something called a biopsychosocial approach. And that looks at all of them pretty much. And this approach is more accurate because it looks at all of the possible influences of behavior. Well, here's the 3 aspects of it. Biological, natural selection, we already talked about that. Genetics, brain mechanisms, hormones. Well, there you go. There's that picture of the Ray LaMontagne, remember? Natural selection. Psychological, conditioned fears, like Watson's schemes. If you didn't see my Module 1 video, remember Watson hit a piece of metal behind a baby to try to make it be scared of a rat, even though that's not ultimately what was making the noise, but the kid didn't know that. So see Jim Carrey, or Bruce, whatever, he was naturally scared. Well, he was scared of having 7 fingers. Imagine if he was born with that, though. If he was born with 7 fingers and everyone had 7 fingers, he wouldn't be scared of it, but it's a conditioned fear because whatever, I mean, it's a fictional character, but let's say if this was real, maybe somehow he watched a movie where there's something to do with someone having more fingers that, I don't know. But that's a conditioned fear. It's not something that you necessarily started out with. And then emotions, and then cognitive. Now, social cultural, presence of people, expectations of them, influences of them. So let's see this Turn Blue tour announcement. Let's see what happens here.
Now every one of you has good reason to be critical of me.
So hopefully the sound went through. I don't know. But people laughed at him. Obviously, it's a joke. But still, if this was real, imagine that's kind of humiliating to be laughed at during a speech. How do things change? You would change what you're saying, maybe your thought process.
Now every one of you.
Okay, so it's trying to play again. Always Google Slides does that. Okay, psychometrics. Well, let's talk about this. This is just studying the measurement of human abilities, attitudes, and traits. Okay, well, some person obviously might have a trait more than another person. Some people can have milder cases of things. All right, let's talk about the research types. Well, there's two different types of research that we're going to talk about, and we'll look at this even more in Module 3. But there's basic research. This is just basically to add knowledge to scientific base. So see the picture, that's Doc Brown from Back to the Future. I don't know if you've seen that. If you haven't, then what I'm about to show you will not make sense. Hopefully you have. So Doc Brown, he's a crazy scientist. But what if he just said that he doesn't care about Marty? Oh, wow, that's not nice. But what do you know? I mean, he's not trying to help Marty. He's just trying to get more information for a scientific base. So too bad, Marty. So then there's also applied research. This is to help change people for the better or solve other problems. So, okay, he could say, all right, fine, I'll help you. So they are still getting knowledge and information, but they're trying to make some sort of change. Okay, well, let's talk about the different psychologists that are associated with basic research, the F off Marty ones. Okay, well, let's talk about 6 different ones. Biological, well, they study the links between the brain and the mind. The brain and the mind aren't the same thing, just so you know. Developmental, they study changes from womb to tomb. That's a thing that Myers likes to say, the writer of the textbook that you are probably reading, womb to tomb. So from when you're born to when you're dead. So they study the changes, all right? Cognitive, they study how we solve problems and remember things. Educational, they study how we enhance, how psychology and psychological processes can enhance teaching and learning. Then there's the personality ones. They study personality patterns. And social, how we influence each other. That's what they study. So you need to remember these and what they study and that they are basic research. Well, what about the ones that they are the applied? They help Marty. Okay, well, there's the industrial organizational, or IO, psychologist. They use psychology to promote the workplace and employee selection. And if that doesn't make sense, let me give an example. There's a company near where I once lived. I guess I shouldn't say the name of it in case there's some kind of like copyright thing, or I don't know, not copyright, whatever you would say, some kind of thing that would make me go to jail or something. It was near where I used to live, and one time someone wanted to get a job there, but they weren't able to because they were required to take some kind of psychological IO survey that was basically like, oh, answer these questions and they can determine, oh, well, he wouldn't be fit for that position. He would only be fit to be a manager, not a salesman. That is what they do. They're like, let's try to make things better. Sometimes, in my opinion, it's not always accurate because I personally believe that certain person was able to be a salesman. But what do you know? The IOs said otherwise. Human factors. That's a subfield of IO. They study the interaction of people, machines, and workplaces. And then there's counseling, which they help people with challenges, sometimes dealing with change, which you probably know about counselors. Clinical psychologists, they treat mental, emotional, and behavior disorders. They treat the disorders. Now down here, there's positive psychologists and community psychologists. Positive ones, they want to change people to benefit the community. So they're like, well, that person has a problem, it's impacting the community, and so let's change them for the better, for the community. And then the community psychologists, they are like, well, I mean, the reason why people have problems, it's the community. So they try to change things for the community to help the people. Okay, so other stuff. This is just like side note sort of thing. So Dorothea Dix, she was a major mental health reformer. We'll talk more about her later, but you just need to remember that's who she was. Now, psychiatrists, they are not psychologists. That's something you need to know. They're not psychologists, not a type of psychologist. The difference is that they are able to prescribe drugs and treat disorders and their causes. Oh, wonderful. Let me pause this. All right, so sorry about that. I actually made fade in instead of fade out for these things on this Google slideshow. So yeah. All right, let's answer these questions. They are not made by me, so all credit to the person who made them, which I'm not going to say who it was. So how about when I'm done reading the question, you pause it, and then once you're ready to see what the answer is, then unpause it, and then I'll show the answer. So let's see. How does the evolutionary process, natural selection of traits, influence behavior? So once again, didn't make these. If I did, I would add commas to that. Okay. It influences behavior by allowing for only certain successful traits to exist, which enable survival. Remember the folk hat orangutans. Remember the ones with the brown hats? They were better. The baseball cap ones, they weren't. Okay, which perspective focuses on the internal thoughts and the way of understanding behavior? So internal thoughts. Cognitive perspective. Okay. All right. Which psychological approach would study brain lesions? Brain lesions. Well, you might not know what that is, but what do you know? It's AP. That's always what it's freaking like. So you just have to kind of think about it. Brain. Biological. It kind of makes sense, even if you don't know what a brain lesion is, which you might not. That's just what it's like. Sorry. AP is stupid. Okay. According to evolutionary psychology, why would people desire interaction, acceptance, and affiliation? Okay. Because in the past, these traits led to the survival of people's ancestors. Well, remember, if it's an evolutionary person, that's the key thing. According to evolutionary psychology, it's not saying something else. What do the evolutionary people think? They think survival of the fittest, natural selection. When a cycle, okay, whoever made this doesn't know apostrophe. When a psychologist considers, oh, well, actually, there's not supposed to be S, whatever. When a psychologist considers differing complementary views from biological to psychological to social cultural for analyzing a given phenomenon. So in simple terms, if they look at all the different things, what is that called? Biopsychosocial approach. Apparently I can't talk today. Identify the individuals who have a medical degree that can prescribe medication. Remember, they're not a psychologist. They're an individual that can prescribe. They have to have medical degree also. That would be a psychiatrist. Create an example of a distributed practice. I didn't talk about that. Oh, I'm sorry. So let me explain what that is before you answer. A distributed practice is something where you essentially are learning something, but it's spread out into different times for effectiveness. So now that you know what it is, create an example. And if you couldn't, that's okay. But here's an example. A person memorizes sheet music by practicing at separate times with spacing between to allow for necessary connections. The brain connections happen when you sleep. So all at once, not going to happen. That's why cramming before an exam, that doesn't work. That's why. Rather than practicing all at once for a long period of time. Okay. Which psychologists use psychotherapy to treat people with disorders? That would be a clinical psychologist. Create an example of applied research. Remember, they're not the F off Marty ones. They're the good ones that try to help them. A psychologist suggests that a man walk outside for 30 minutes a day to help his mental disorder, anxiety, for example, to help him thrive. If it was just basic research, well, he wouldn't care about the man. He would just try to research about his condition. All right. Which psychological perspective focuses on how our interpretation of an event affects how we react to it? Interpretation of an event, how we react to it. The cognitive perspective. Interpretation, that's a key word. All right, which psychologist would help children develop skills they need to deal with an adverse situation? So, you might think educational. Counseling. Now, sorry, I didn't mean to emphasize children, but adversive situation. It wasn't talking about learning, it was talking about adversive situation. So that would be counseling. Identify the subfield of IO psychology that researches, didn't type this, remember? The interaction of people, machines, and the environment. Human factor psychologists. What can a psychiatrist do that a psychologist cannot? I talked about this. What is that? Oh, they're able to prescribe medication and treat physical causes of psychological disorders. Last question, and it's kind of hard to see, sorry, because that's too up high. Create an example of what an IO psychologist does. Oh, well, what do you know? I already said an example about what thing happened to someone I knew. Remember, they said he couldn't be a salesman. I don't remember if this is what I made the answer, though. Oh, well, that's pretty much what it is. They create a psychological examination or evaluation to give to all applicants, which determines whether or not they're fit for a given company. That's exactly what happened at that company. All right. Lastly, I want to say support these two artists. Well, you might not like that kind of music, so that's okay if you don't, but they both have similar music, but they're both two nice people / person, whatever, that I actually have been able to contact before. Not that easily for that one, Early James, but Jen Lady. So I'm not going to get into how I knew them or anything, but I just think that it'd be helpful to support them just by listening to their music. If you happen to like folk music / rock / blues / whatever, there you go. That's what it's like. So that's fine if you don't like that music, because some people prefer like pop or rap or something, but that's okay. So hopefully this helped. Thank you for watching.